Okay, so let me ask you two simple questions. The first one, could you break an if block? I'm sure most of you would straight away say, obviously not. I mean, that goes without saying. Break statement just breaks a loop or a switch block. It doesn't break an if block. It's not even allowed in an if block. Okay, now the second question. Suppose there are two for loops, one nested inside the other, and I want to break the outer loop from within the nested loop. Is that possible? Now you will take a moment to think, but your ultimate answer would be that it's not possible. The break statement inside the nested for loop would just break the nested loop, and then we have to put another break statement inside the outer for loop to break the outer loop. So these both are pretty easy questions, and you would think that they're correct, but unfortunately, you answered both of them wrong. At least, I mean, most of you would have answered it wrong. Hey guys, this is Rajat Kataria, and welcome back. Today, we'll learn another new and simple concept of Java named as labeled block. So, let's start. Okay, so a labeled block, as the name says, what is a block? Block is just zero or more statements that are enclosed in curly braces. So that's a block. For example, an if, a for, a while, a do while, a static initializer, instance initializers, all of them are blocks. So, okay. And what's a label? Any valid Java identifier, just like variable names. So that's a label. Uh, Pretty plain. Okay. And what's a labeled block if we combine the two? It's just a block with a label. Like we assign uh, variable names, just like that, we assign names to blocks. That's a label block. Okay. So now coming to our first question. Could we break an if statement? Okay. Let's see. This is a pretty plain if block, and I've inserted a break statement inside it, and the compiler throws an error here. Let's see what's the error. Break cannot be used outside of a loop or a switch. Oh my god, you're correct. Uh, you are correct, but not totally correct. Actually, there's a way to break an if block, and that's via labeled break. So let's see what it is. We could just comment out the code, and yes, what's a labeled break? Labeled break exists in a block, and as we earlier saw, a block can be zero or more statements that are enclosed in curly braces. So no matter if it's a for or a while or an if or any other block of that sort. So that's it. Okay, so now we'll see what's the syntax. Okay, so the syntax is also very simple. We just name the block like we name variables, and then we put a colon, and after that we just put our if block or any other block of that sort. So now what the compiler internally does it's the compiler basically assigns the name if block to this particular block of code. So now basically if block is the identifier of this particular block, and now if we want we can break it. We can just put break, and following the break we can put the name of the block, that is the if block. Okay, so this is how we can actually break an if block. And okay, so another question from my side, a simple one. I'll just comment out this line and cut this and paste it here. Okay, so now my question to you is, if I uncomment line number 23, would the compiler throw an error or it would work fine? So I'm not sure if you have answered it correctly, but you must do, because this is just a logical question, and the answer is no. This would give a compiler error in this case. And why? Let's see what the compiler says. It says unreachable code, and that's obvious. In this case, we could just put the break statement at the end of the if block, not before that. Okay, so let's move ahead. Now coming on to our second question. Can you break the outer loop in case of nested loops? So now I'm sure most of you would have thought it that it is possible. How we could just label the for loop, outer for loop, and then use the labeled break inside the nested loop. Here we are basically labeling the outer for loop as outer for and breaking it inside the nested for loop. So this could be done, and this is very much possible. And yeah, okay. So this was pretty much it about labeled break, and let's move on to labeled continue. Now, break and continue go hand in hand. Why are we studying labeled continue separately? So let's discuss it. Labeled continue cannot be used inside any block. It can just be used with loops, that is for, while, and do while. It is not allowed inside an if block. And what's the reason? Again, the reason is very much logical. What does a continue do? Continue just skips the block of code and moves to the next iteration of the loop. That's what a continue does. And in an if block, there is no other iteration that is going to happen. So labeled continue is not allowed. Why a labeled break was allowed? Because break just breaks that particular block of code and comes out of it, and that can be done in an if block as well. But a labeled continue inside an if block would make no sense. That's why the label continue is not allowed. Okay, so let's quickly see an example here. Now these both block of codes are similar to each other. The only difference is that inside the first one we are using a break, labeled break, and inside the second one we are using a labeled continue. And as we see, both of them are used to break the outer if block. For a break it's allowed, but for a continue it's not allowed, it's invalid. So, and what does it say? We could just read the compiler error once. Continue cannot be used outside of a loop. That's a very good explanation from the compiler, pretty clean and clear. Okay, so that was it about labeled break and labeled continue. I hope you have learned something new. If there is any question or any doubt which you still have, I'll be more than happy to answer it in the comment section below. So I'll meet you in the next one. Till then, bye bye. Have a nice day.